Well, whatever. If the streaming condition isn't good, I don't know, man. Whatever. Shit. There we go. What is this? Okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Seems like the streaming quality is very inconsistent. I don't know how much I can do about that. But I'm mad, and I want to rant about stuff. I'm not actually mad, but I do want to rant. What I want to rant about is... Okay, wait, let's see. 6. Is that right? This might be wrong. Oh, I was right. Okay. Okay, so what I want to rant about is the Game Awards. Because this is a dumb show. I don't really take it seriously, honestly. I haven't taken it seriously in years. So, like, I'm not, mad that my favorite game didn't get nominated. But it is... I kind of want to rant about what a dumb show it is. Because it is treated as, like, the Oscars of video games, but it's not. It's more like the MTV Movie Awards. Or, like, the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards. Like, the only reason it's treated as the Oscars of the video games is because we don't really have an actual comparable awards show to the Oscars. And Jeff Keighley has put a lot of time and effort and money into making people think that this is the premier awards show for the medium. But the real purpose of the show isn't to, celebrate the medium, to celebrate video games, and give out awards to games. The real purpose of the show is to create ad spots so that Jeff Keighley can make money and let Jeff Keighley rub elbows with celebrities. Like, that is the purpose of the Game Awards. So it's best not to take it seriously. But all that said, like, it is dumb and kind of embarrassing that something so blatantly that is treated as such a big deal in the gaming industry, because it is a big commercial. And okay, the Oscars have issues, definitely, but, like, there is some respectability there. And I would actually say, like, the Oscars the big issue with the Oscars is kind of the opposite of the big issue, or one of the big issues with the Game Awards, and that is that, like, the Oscars is very disconnected from, like, what the mainstream watches. Like, anytime you watch the Oscars, you will see, like, unless you're very, very connected and really, really following, like, all the movies that there will be, like, a bunch of movies nominated that you're like, I hadn't even heard of that movie. And in one sense, that's good that underlooked movies are appreciated. But on the other hand, it kind of has led to a lot of people just kind of checking out of the Oscars. Because it's like, well, they're just celebrating a bunch of movies I don't know about. I have no horse in this race, so I don't care. And it's kind of given the Oscars like this reputation of being like a snobby thing, and I don't know. I don't think it's like people trying to be. Here's what I think happened: is that back in the '90s it wasn't like this. Like the '90s and earlier, like the movies that won awards at the Oscars tended to be pretty popular movies. But the thing is, the types of movies that won awards at the Oscars tended to be like dramas, serious dramas, and I think what happened is people just stopped going to the movies to see dramas because it got expensive to go to the movies, and we got really good dramas at home. You know, the 2000s kind of came with the rise of peak TV. They got, you know, like the cable dramas like The Sopranos, and then on like the basic cable we got stuff like Battlestar Galactica and the Zero. How are you going down to 0? What is this? Oh, whatever. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep streaming, whatever. Anyway, and then, like, you know, on network TV, we got shows like Lost, and it was like, of course, that led to shows like Breaking Bad and Game of Thrones, and it's just kind of, I think people just kind of decided that they didn't need to go to the theaters to see like a 2-hour drama. They would rather stay home and watch a drama that's like an entire season. And yeah, so I think that's kind of a big thing. And so, like, ultimately, I think what the movies that people go see in theaters now fall into 3 categories. So there's basically the spectacle movies, where, you know, seeing it on a really big screen is a very exciting part of the experience. Like a big screen with a big sound system. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go see like a big budget action blockbuster on that. And then we have family movies, because that is a, you know, going to a dark room with a big movie to watch is a pretty reliable type of family outing. You know, you kind of know what to expect and how long you're going to be there, and your kids are going to probably sit down and be quiet for a couple hours. So that's why, you know, family movies do so well. And then we got the event movies, which have a lot of crossover with the spectacle movies, but aren't necessarily those. And those are movies where it's like, you know, you want to see it in the theater because you want to be part of the zeitgeist. You don't want to be the guy talking about it 3 months later when nobody's talking about that movie anymore. And I think a great example of all this was the whole Barbenheimer thing. Because, like, Barbie and Oppenheimer were not family movies and not really spectacle movies, but they both did incredibly well because they were event movies. They were, you know, the zeitgeist, and everyone wanted to go see them. So yeah, so like as the years have gone by, like the number of genres have kind of fallen out of favor with moviegoers. It's like especially comedies and especially dramas. And the big thing with dramas is that that's usually the kind of movie that, you the Academy is looking for. So that, I think, is part of the reason that there's such a disconnect between the Academy and like the average moviegoers, and why that divide has kept getting larger. Another reason is that I think movies are easier to make and distribute now. Back in the 90s, if you wanted to make a movie, you probably had to like have connections to Hollywood, and you needed connections, you needed equipment and actors and sets and all of this stuff. And then if you wanted to distribute it, if you wanted anyone to actually see it, you definitely needed connections. And that's not really the case now. If you want to make a movie, you have everything you need in your pocket. Like, there are, it's not the most advanced camera, but it's like a more advanced camera on your phone than like some movies have been filmed on, and there have been movies filmed with phone cameras. So it's, it's maybe not the ideal equipment, but it is equipment that can get the job done, and it's better equipment than most people had access to 30 years ago. And then if you want to distribute it, you can just put a movie on YouTube and people will see it. But also, we have a lot more. Here we go. We have a lot more like. One second. Let me try to remember. Is it forward? Probably not. Nope. Like, there are a lot of like indie film festivals where you can go and show off your film and maybe get picked up by a distributor. Like, there are a lot more we have a lot more access to like these smaller budget passion projects, like creator-driven passion projects. And so in the 90s, if you were a foreign film or an indie film, you probably weren't even on the Academy's radar. And now you are. Or now you can be. If you make a really good movie, you can get noticed. And you can make a really good movie with relatively affordable equipment. But that movie isn't going to be in theaters where mass audiences are watching it. It'll be like a limited run distribution. And kind of the third thing is that, the Academy, they watch a lot of movies. And so their tastes get, I don't know about narrowed, but more discerning, I guess. Like, something that is like very exciting and like to the average moviegoer, and a very good, very well made, someone who has watched 8 million movies kind of be like, well, I've seen this, so it's not very exciting to me, and I'm not really invested in this. So like, they are more I don't know, engaged by these smaller creator-driven films that try to do something that they haven't seen before. And so that's where I think the disconnect with between like mainstream audiences and like the Oscars comes from. And there's also a question of like, is it even a bad thing? And I would say like, not necessarily, but it's also not a good thing. Like if the show is meant to celebrate the medium and it doesn't really reflect the way that the majority of people are experiencing the medium, and doesn't really acknowledge the way that the majority of people are experiencing the medium, you know, maybe that divide isn't very healthy, and you know, I think that divide leads to this idea of the Academy being like elitist snobs. But I don't really know what the solution is to that. Like, I'm not gonna say like they should definitely nominate like every Marvel movie because they make money. I guess, you know, maybe they're not making that much money these days, but I'm not saying like they definitely need to nominate all the most financially successful films. But at the same time, it's like if something is really connecting with audiences, I feel like that is notable. And if you are celebrating the medium, that is something worth noting. And I don't know. Something I occasionally come back to is like Lord of the Rings: Return of the King won Best Picture. And I don't think that would happen today. I think the modern day Academy would kind of feel like that's too much of a big action spectacle movie. But anyway, that's kind of getting back on topic. Like, the Game Awards has basically the opposite issue, where their nominations are dominated by just basically the most mainstream and widely beloved and widely known games of the year. You will never see, like, I'm not gonna say necessarily never, but you will rarely see, you know, a game get nominated for a big award and be like, oh, I haven't heard of that game. It happens all the time with movies that the Oscars nominates, but not so much with games the Game Awards nominates. And, you know, I just said all this stuff about, like, the Academy should more reflect what the average user is experiencing, but also like they should, I mean, like I said, like they shouldn't just put the highest grossing movies in the Best Picture nominations. And then that's not exactly what the games do. Like, we're not seeing like Call of Duty and FIFA in the best, you know, Game of the Year nomination. But it is always like just the games that people have been talking about. And it's not just the Game of the Year nomination. It's basically every category except for the game. What was it? It was like Games for Impact. Like, that category will sometimes have some surprises. Like, oh, I haven't heard of that game. But like everything else is just like you reach the end of the year and you know which games are going to be dominating the nominations, and you kind of know like which games aren't going to be there, like which games are probably going to be snubbed because they haven't been dominating the online conversation. And yeah, that just doesn't feel like a good awards show that is so just panders to mainstream sensibility. That's the other thing, is that they do all this pandering stuff where it's like, you'll have someone on stage to like give a shout out to, oh yeah, we don't like this about the industry this year, so we're gonna like get on stage and mention it. It's like, remember when Hideo Kojima was having all the stuff happening at Konami, and then like Jeff went up and said, oh yeah, I don't know, shame on Konami, blah, blah, blah. And everyone cheered, and that was stupid. Like that's just like such a pandering thing. And then when they had like Joseph Fares come on to like say something, and they do this a lot, and it's just like, but then they don't really talk about the real issues with the gaming industry. Like Jeff is very hesitant to bring up, for example, the mass layoffs, or you know, the companies trying to replace workers with AI. I doubt either of those things are going to come up this year on stage. You know, it is probably going to come up. Somebody's going to go on stage and say, like, yeah, a game shouldn't be $80, and everyone's going to cheer, because that's the thing that the gamers are mad about this year. And it's just I don't know. It's a dumb show. It's good to not take it seriously, but it is annoying that it is considered like treated like it matters. But the one thing that like the one category that I kind of look at every year and just kind of go like, yep, that category is still stupid, is best music. Because it almost always sucks. I think the only times I agreed with the win were Doom 2016, and I think Final Fantasy VII Remake won. It's like, yeah, those games have phenomenal music, but it is just like so consistently just a consistently terrible category. They're like probably the most snubs I can think of in the history of the show. Like, if you can think of a game, and like since the Game Awards began, that had a soundtrack that has had a lasting impact, that like people still talk about and listen to today, there's a good chance it wasn't even nominated for Best Music. Here's a few examples. I think Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze came out, I think the year the Game Awards started. And that game, like a big thing with that game was, oh, we got back David Wise, who kind of did, you know, the incredible and iconic soundtracks of the first two Donkey Kong Country games. He had help on the first, but he did like I think most of it. But he was well known for just like, oh yeah, he did the incredible Donkey Kong music. And those games have of course had a long-lasting legacy of great music, and he came back with Tropical Freeze, just like knocked it out of the park. Just like it is arguably even better than his classic soundtracks, because now he has like more tools to work with. He's less limited, and there's just like a lot more great music in this game. And I'm not gonna say, like, more is always better, but, you know, if it is, like, a dozen great tracks versus 30 great tracks or whatever, it's like, yeah, I mean, the latter is gonna be a more satisfying soundtrack, probably. But yeah, that is, like, today, like, it has held up, and people still talk about that soundtrack as one of the all-time greats. And that, it didn't get nominated. But, you know, it was like, okay, you know, it's on the Wii U. Nobody has a Wii U. Whatever. But let's, you know, there were some other great examples of snubs, like Shovel Knight didn't get nominated. And it, I mean, that is another one that's had, like, a very, like, that is an all-time great chiptune soundtrack, but that's the problem. It's a chiptune soundtrack. And what it seems like is that by best soundtrack, 9 times out of 10, what they mean is, like, best movie soundtrack. Like, which game has music that would sound best in a movie? Or they just, you know, literally got a film composer to just do the score, and it's always the same kind of, like, serious, dramatic, orchestral type of music, and other types of music are lesser. They are not really considered for best soundtrack. And one of the few exceptions I can think of was Doom 2016. But other exceptions are very rare. I can't think of any off the top of my head. And you know, there's not something necessarily inherently wrong with, like, orchestral cinematic music, but when that is, like, all that is respected and praised, it's like, okay, but there's other kinds of music. There's other games that have great music. And chiptunes, like, video game music is built on chiptunes. And it is this kind of consistent issue, I think, with the Game Awards as a whole, where generally, not always, but there's this aversion to games that are video gamey. And not always. Like, Astro Bot won last year, and that was a very video gamey game. But they, you know, being like a movie is seen as more cinematic and more artistic. So music that sounds like it's from a movie is more artistic. And so even a fantastic soundtrack, fantastic chiptune soundtrack like Shovel Knight, that is, again, like, still, it has held up. It is still widely praised and widely listened to. That wasn't nominated. Was Sonic Mania nominated? I don't really feel like looking it up, but, like, that should have been nominated. But on the other hand, 2017 was a pretty wild year, so fair enough if it wasn't nominated that year. And, like, one of the most egregious ones that I can think of is Undertale. I think it is not an exaggeration to say that Undertale has one of the most impactful soundtracks ever. Of its decade, definitely. Possibly ever. Like, it's just kind of... You have heard Undertale music even if you don't know you've heard Undertale music. And I'm not even talking about just Megalovania. But like Megalovania alone is like such a great track. Like that alone would justify its place in the nominations, but you know, it also has so many other great tracks. So yeah, it is absolutely wild that Undertale, I don't know what won that year, but Undertale wasn't even nominated. And the last one that I can think of that kind of was where I kind of decided, was like, okay, this is dumb. I'm done with it. Is Tetris Effect, which is a game... Like, Tetris is a video gamey video game. It is the most video gamey video game. You play Tetris, you were there to drop blocks and score points. There is, in most versions of Tetris, there isn't, like, any sort of pretext of a story. You're just there to play a game and have fun. And Tetris Effect like took this structure and through its music and visuals and sound design, but like I would say a significant amount of the work was done through the music. Like made it a genuinely emotional experience. Like they didn't add an explicit story of like, oh, you're trying to save the day by playing Tetris or whatever. Like Tetris is a metaphor for depression or whatever. They just played beautiful music that fit with the beautiful visuals, and you just absorbed the game, like all of this while playing Tetris, and it was just, it sounds wild to say that a Tetris game was genuinely emotional, and you know, if you haven't played Tetris Effect, it's hard to explain why and how. And even if you have played Tetris Effect, like some people played it and they were like, I don't get it. I don't get how you got this experience. But like enough people have gotten this experience that like I'm not a crazy person. I'm not alone on this. This was how the game was experienced by many people. And the music was a massive part of that. And so like when that year came around and like Tetris Effect wasn't nominated, I was like, okay, hold on, this is dumb. That is, oh no. Okay, let's try this again. That was my mistake. Yeah, and so like every year I kind of I check the also like the fact, like going back to Tetris Effect, it is not getting best soundtrack is kind of the most egregious thing. Like it at least deserved best soundtrack, but the fact that it didn't really get any recognition outside of a best VR AR nomination, which it lost, is like that is egregious to me, because Tetris Effect feels like something that in any other medium would feel like award bait. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like it is a very like, I don't know. It is a very artsy game. It is a, you know, a creator's vision. using kind of abstract imagery to reflect on, I don't know, humanity. And like it's hard, like, again, it's hard to explain, but like it is a creator using music and abstract imagery and sort of just concepts to reflect on humanity and sort of tell the story of humanity through implication, not told explicitly. That it is a very artsy game, and like for the fact that it didn't really get recognized for that at all at the Game Awards, like other award shows recognized it, and I don't know, that like demonstrates how the Game Awards is so different from how you would see these awards in other mediums. Like these kinds of incredibly well executed artsy like whatevers in any other medium would tend to get a lot of buzz at the big awards show, but it wasn't the big and super popular game. So, and it was also a video game-ass video game, which, as I said before, is not something that the Game Awards really likes, usually, with some exceptions. But it's definitely a case where, like video games kind of have this issue where when people want to defend them and be like, oh no, video games are art. The examples people tend to point to are just games that do a good job at imitating other mediums. And I don't think that's necessarily, like, wrong. But, like, The Last of Us, for example, is a very good game, and I do think it is a good game to point to. Is like, yes, games can tell meaningful stories. They aren't just totally meaningless. But it is also a game that takes so many of its cues from film. So it just kind of feels like when people point to The Last of Us as like the height of video games as art, it feels like, oh, yes, video games can be art because they can be pretty good movies. Or like another example is like Disco Elysium, which is, to be clear, a fantastic game. But it is a game that is very, like, what makes it fantastic isn't necessarily the game part, it's just like a very well-written game. And, you know, and that isn't something to be dismissed, but like, how often do you see a game that is like, this game is art because of the way it utilizes the interactive medium? And it's not often. But I think Tetris Effect is kind of the purest example of that, where they just kind of utilized video games as an artistic medium to the most of their ability, and like delivered a meaningful emotional experience without trying to imitate other mediums. And kind of, I don't know, and it's definitely it is surprising that it didn't get like more recognition. It's not surprising, but it is notable that it didn't get more recognition at the Game Awards. And to be clear, this isn't just like me like saying, "Oh, my favorite game didn't get nominated, so that's why the Game Awards." There are a lot of games I love that didn't get nominated that I never expected to get nominated. Like, I don't know. I have weird taste in games, and I usually don't like the most popular games. So I usually expect to like disagree with the nominations. But then there are games where I'm like, look, this, like, putting aside my personal taste and preferences, like, this is just an exemplary video game that we as a medium should look at this and be like, oh, okay, yeah, this represents something that video games can be. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah. Anyway, so like when Tetris Effect got totally snubbed, I was just like, okay, I'm not taking these awards seriously anymore. But I still do check out the music category every year just to kind of chuckle at it. And this year was especially bad. I will say, like, I haven't played all the games in that category. I will say I didn't like Expedition 33. I very much disliked it. I knew I would hate it before I played it, and then I played it, and I was like, yep, I hate it. So I just kind of had a feeling, like, based on when, like, the way people were talking about it, and when I see these kinds of games, I don't know, I had a feeling, and then I played it, and I was like, yep, I hate it. And I could talk in, like, more detail about what I didn't like about it, but the music in the game is great, so, like, it deserves the best music nomination. It deserves, you know, best art direction nomination, sure. It was just a miserable game to actually play, like, but aesthetically, it was great, so I got no problem with those. But there are just, like, a lot of very notable snubs. And going back to the Tetris Effect thing, they had a chance to kind of right their wrong, because Enhance, the studio that made Tetris Effect, made another game this year called Lumines Arise. And it is kind of a spiritual successor to Tetris Effect, but with a different puzzle game called Lumines, which was kind of their in-house puzzle game that Tetsuya Mizuguchi made, because he wanted to make a puzzle game and they couldn't get the rights to Tetris, so he was like, okay, I will make a puzzle game that has kind of a music theme to it. And then, so he made it, and it was somewhat well received, and they've kind of, like, come back to it now and then with new versions. And oh, but I've clicked all the buttons. Where are the final button? Where's the final button? Yeah, this is a sneaky room. But so yeah, he created Lumines to have their kind of his own puzzle game. And then years later, they got, he got to actually make a Tetris game with Tetris Effect. And it was like, you know, this dream project for him. And it was awesome, and it was incredible. And then he went and, let's see, I'll do these first. Yeah. So then this year they decided to okay, one second, let me decide where to go next. like this year they made a new a version of Lumines that kind of uses the aesthetic sensibilities of Tetris Effect, kind of like combining those two ideas into one, and it was great. I don't like Lumines as much as Tetris, so I didn't like it. I didn't love it as much as Tetris. Like Tetris, just like, I don't know. Tetris is built different. Tetris is like Alexei Pajitnov just kind of accidentally made the best game ever, and he was never able to replicate that, so he just like went all in on Tetris. But yeah, even despite that, Lumines Arise has incredible music just like Tetris Effect, and absolutely should have been nominated, and it wasn't. Like, because it is sort of like, I don't think it's an indie game. I don't know if Enhanced technically counts as an indie studio, but it was a smaller game. It wasn't a AAA game, and it wasn't like one of the 5 indie games that everyone's talking about this year. So it, you know, it didn't get any recognition at the Game Awards, and I didn't expect it to get any recognition at the Game Awards. Like, this wasn't me like, oh darn, I thought it was gonna get a mention. It was like, I was certain it wasn't gonna, like, when I was playing the game, I was like, this game should get a mention, and it definitely won't. So yeah, that didn't get nominated. This is a wild game. There's like one level that's like breakbeat pigeons. There's another that's like chameleons dancing to techno. It's a strange game, but music is incredible. Yeah, it's a good game. Like, I've gotten better at Lumines, and I've enjoyed it more, but just kind of not as much as Tetris. I kind of just wish it was Tetris Effect too, but yeah, what can you do? So that didn't get nominated. Some other games that didn't get nominated were, that absolutely should have. Unbeatable, but you know, Unbeatable kind of had the bad luck. It got delayed at the last second. So I guess maybe it didn't release within the time window, but like, even if it did, it definitely wasn't getting nominated, and that sucks, because it has an incredible soundtrack of like this kind of just an original album of like, I don't even know what it is called. This is like grungy rock pop kind of music. I don't know what the genre is exactly called, but like, just the music in the demo was like that was good enough that it should have been nominated. So like, whatever they have in the final game, I'm certain is even better. So okay, that one maybe didn't come out in time. Another one is Rift of the Necrodancer, which, like, Crypt of the Necrodancer is another game that I'm pretty sure didn't get nominated despite having an incredible soundtrack. And Rift of the Necrodancer was, okay, we'll make, like, instead of a roguelike with music elements, it is just straight up a music game. And so it featured like a lot of excellent remixes of the music from Crypt of the Necromancer. Like, excellent remixes of already excellent music. So that should have gotten nominated, and it didn't. But okay, all of these were like smaller games and indie games that just like weren't, again, the 5 indie games that everyone's talking about this year, so they didn't get nominated. And I didn't really expect any of them to, but the shocking snub is Mario Kart World. It's like, say what you want about that game. You know, is it a game that's worth $80? Probably not. But is it a soundtrack that's worth $80? I mean, kinda. It has like something like 4+ hours of just absolutely incredible remixes of Mario music, and just like all sorts of different genres. It's, yeah, like in terms of longevity, like, we already know that that soundtrack is going to have staying power. You are going to be hearing people, you are going to be hearing music from Mario Kart World for like a decade from now. You're just gonna hear that music pop up everywhere, and like, yeah, it is a shocking snub to not include it, but it does kind of fit in with, like, in general, the Game Awards is, well, again, it like reflects the popular online gamer sentiment, and the popular online gamer sentiment right now is very upset at Nintendo. So, you know, I think they just generally didn't want to give Nintendo too many nominations, outside of the typical family game nominations. And they got DK Bonanza. Like, DK Bonanza did get nominated for Game of the Year, so I don't like pretend like Nintendo was completely snubbed this year, but it's like, I don't know. It's very strange that Mario Kart World didn't get nominated for Best Soundtrack. Anyway, that's my rant about the Game Awards and how bad the soundtrack, best music, category always is. 45,000 in 6 hours? Or 7 hours? What is 7 times 6? I'm really bad at my math. My multiplication. I was always... You sit me down, like tell me to do like the long complex problems where you like write out the logic and stuff, and I'd be like, yeah, I can do this. But then we'd like have the math minute where it's, oh, you gotta do all of the times tables in a minute, and that just kind of like cratered my grade because I wasn't good at that. So I always kind of struggle to pull up simple multiplications like 7 times 6. That's what? 42. So 7 times 60 would be 420. Nice. And 1,000 times, not 1,000. What was it? 1,010 minutes would be 100. So times 100. 4,200 is kind of where I should be for my average of 1,010 minutes. And I'm ahead of that? That can't be right. I feel like I got way behind for a while. Or maybe I've just been getting better at clicking the buttons. Yeah, 7 times 60 would be 420. And add 2 zeros. 100 per minute is... Huh. Yeah, and I think the math is right. So I'm actually ahead of my prediction. I think maybe those, I don't know, the Lost Woods rooms just had a really good setup. Anyway, the movie that should win Best Picture this year is Predator: Badlands, but it won't even get nominated. I'm only partly joking. That movie was really good. Except for the parts where it was too dark to see anything. Movies really need... What's that, that tweet where it's like, we need gaffers. Stop starting podcasts. We need gaffers. But yeah, I haven't seen like a ton of movies this year. Let's see. Mostly I don't know, what have I seen? Like Superman was good. Thunderbolts was great. Yeah, Fantastic Four was pretty good. Let's see, Final Destination, that was great. So The Monkey, that was a very silly movie. Saw Tron Ares, and I liked it, despite having Jared Leto in it. It would have been a better movie without Jared Leto in it, but it was very, like... I don't know. It's just kind of the thing where it's like... I've been waiting 15 years for this movie. I can either let this one guy completely ruin it, or, like, appreciate the other aspects about it. And I decided to do the latter. And ultimately, it kind of, I don't know. I guess kind of my thought is, I feel like going into my Tron lecture. I have a Tron lecture kind of prepared mentally. Anytime anybody asks me about Tron, we're gonna start from the beginning. Yeah, let's talk about Tron. So Tron, like, as a movie, basically only exists because Disney wanted a Star Wars, because Star Wars came out in 1977 and just completely changed the film industry. And everyone was like, hey, we want one of those. And so Disney made a few sci-fi movies to try to capture that audience. And one of them was Tron. And it did not capture that audience. It didn't do Star Wars numbers. But, contrary to popular belief, it didn't flop. Like, it wasn't a complete disaster. Like, it made a bit of money, but it didn't make Star Wars money, so... Disney was like, nah, we're not. We don't need more Tron. But unlike, you know, other examples, like they had, what else did they have? Like the Black Hole and Flight of the Navigator, I think. That was Disney, I think. Like, Tron stuck with people. The people who did see it, like, it stuck with people. Because it's, I've seen it described as a movie that you kind of like when you watch it, but then, like, when you remember it, you think about, like, the vibes and the concepts and, like, the unique imagery. So when you remember it, you love it. Which is just a really interesting thing, because, like, it's not a particularly great movie. It's not a terrible movie. It's just kind of, like, of its time. It's a very silly, like, I don't know, a silly concept that kind of takes itself very seriously. But then you got, like, Jeff Bridges in there just being a cartoon character sometimes. Oh, wow, okay. I didn't even realize I was that far. And drink some water. Oh, I got a person. Hello. I've just been in here kind of rambling to myself about Tron and movies and video games and stuff. I can continue rambling, or if you have any questions, I can answer them. I was just about to go into a big spiel about the history of Tron. It's weird now that there's actually someone in here listening to me. Like, I was just talking to myself, man. Yeah, so the history of Tron. So basically, like, Star Wars came out and it, like, changed the film industry and kind of pushed the film industry towards this whole, like, big budget blockbuster thing and kind of, no, it's good. You can stick around. It's, but yeah, so like everyone's like, we want a Star Wars. So Disney wanted a Star Wars, and one of the Star Warses they made was Tron. And it wasn't a flop, but it wasn't a big success, but they kind of like, you know, kind of didn't immediately follow it up. So they just, but it had an impact on the people who did watch it. So like, it's interesting because the people who saw Tron and went on to make stuff, like, you can see where people were very heavily inspired by Tron, because Tron is everywhere. Like, basically any story that's, like, people go into computers, you can see some Tron in there. And you can see Tron in, like, subtle ways or more direct ways. I mean, like, the show Reboot was basically we have Tron at home, and then there's a whole Dexter's Laboratory episode where it was just a direct parody of Tron, which I didn't understand when I was a kid, because I hadn't seen Tron yet, but it's like, very clearly just directly Tron. And then, you know, like on South Park, their version of Moses is inspired by a character from Tron, and probably an edgy joke, but that I won't kind of go into. But like, the Tron influence is everywhere, and it's fascinating how it kind of stuck around despite not being very. I mean, look at this game. I didn't even realize I was doing it, and then I was like thinking about Tron. I was like, oh, I just did a Tron with the you know, the dark colors and the glowing neon. And it's like, oh yeah, that just had a very strong impact on my design and aesthetic sensibilities. But yeah, so that was kind of the end of Tron for a while. But then, like, we got to the 2000s where, like, the people who were kids when Tron came out and saw it, and they were nostalgic for Tron, and then they started to put Tron and stuff. So we got, like, a sequel game with Tron 2.0, and we got Tron and Kingdom Hearts. So there's, like, sort of a bubbling resurgence, and then, you know, the Star Wars prequels came out, and they were successful and made a whole lot of money. And Disney, again, was like, hey, we want a Star Wars. We should get a Star Wars. I think Disney also had, like, the Pirates of the Caribbean movies do extremely well. So they were like, oh, we want more, like, we've been the family-friendly company for a really long time, so we want more, we kind of want to try more of these, like, PG-13 action-adventure spectacle movies. And, you know, specifically, they wanted a Star Wars, and so they kind of revisited Tron, and we got Tron Legacy. And, again, a lot of people think it flopped, and it didn't. It just didn't do Star Wars numbers. And there was, like, a sequel planned. It's just kind of, over the next few years, some pretty significant things happened. and in 2012 specifically, like, two big things happened. Well, Disney released, you know, the Avengers, and they kind of got their Star Wars that they always wanted in terms of, like, the big, like, very big, very mainstream spectacle movie, and that, you know, makes Star Wars money. And then they also literally bought Star Wars. So now they had, like, basically the new generation Star Wars, and they had literally Star Wars, so they didn't really need Tron. But they still didn't cancel, like, Tron 3. They kind of, like, put it on the back burner for a while. But it was still generally planned. But then in 2015, they released a movie called Tomorrowland. It was like a George Clooney vehicle, and it just completely flopped. And at that point, they were just like, okay, you know what? We don't need, like, these other live-action things besides, like, we got Star Wars, we got Marvel, we got our live-action remakes. We don't need more live-action movies. So they basically canceled most of them, and including Tron 3. But at the time, apparently they had been in talks with Jared Leto to, like, bring him on board as the villain, or one of the antagonists. And I guess kind of, like, reading between the lines, what happened over the next couple years was Jared Leto kept, like, coming back to them and was like, come on, I really want a Tron movie, and sort of settled on, okay, we're reviving the project, and now Jared Leto is his character has been reworked to be the star of the movie, and also Jared Leto is a producer. And here's the thing, is, like, you know, now we all hate Jared Leto, but at the time it kind of seemed like a good idea from their point of view, because he had recently won an Oscar, and he was, like, in a bunch of upcoming big movies. He was in Blade Runner, and he was in, like, he was the new Joker. So it seemed like he was going to be a big deal and an up-and-coming star. So, like, okay, I can see where Disney would be like, hey, it's a good idea to get this up-and-coming star, like this guy who's going to be a big thing on our movie. And, like, he's clearly very passionate about it. But then it seemed like they got stuck with him because he was a producer. And they couldn't, like, once, you know, we got all the Morbius and we got, like, all the awful, you know, allegations and stuff about him, they couldn't easily fire him. But then the project kind of went on ice again. And I think what happened, again, I'm kind of filling in the blanks here, but I think what happened was after like in the early 2020s, when Marvel and Star Wars kind of stopped having so much stopped being so reliably successful, I think Disney kind of panicked, and they're like, oh, we gotta do, like, some other stuff too. We can't just, we put all of our eggs in these two baskets, and then we put too many eggs in the baskets, and then the bottom dropped out, and now we have baskets without without a bottom, so the eggs are just falling out. And it's, I'm kind of taking this metaphor in, like, a weird way, but so I think that's kind of why they sort of they brought back Tron 3 and finally did it, because they had, like, that was kind of, like, ready to go, sort of. They had a script, they had a star. That star was a producer, so he was, like, providing some of the funding for it. And it's like, okay, fine, he did Morbius, but, you know, this is better than not having anything. And yeah, so I think that's kind of why we got stuck with Jared Leto in Tron Ares. And it sucks. It definitely makes it a worse movie. But I still overall enjoyed the movie. I think it is a very interesting case where it's actually more of a sequel to the first Tron than it is to Tron Legacy. It's weird because Tron Legacy and Tron Ares are both sequels to the first Tron in different ways. Where Tron Legacy follows the Grid and Flynn, and then Tron Ares follows the Real World and Dillinger. Presumably, the idea was that we would get a fourth movie where those two things collide, and, you know, maybe in another 15 to 30 years, they'll try to revisit the series again, and we'll get that big climactic finale. But that's definitely not happening anytime soon, because Tron Ares, like, genuinely flopped. Like, the original Tron, it made money, it didn't do Star Wars numbers. Tron Legacy, it made money, it didn't do Star Wars numbers. Tron Ares was a disaster. I will say, as far as, like, Jared Leto's inclusion, like, him just being there is kind of gross. I don't like that. But his performance at least isn't bad. It's not another, like, trying way too hard to be edgy like the Joker. And, you know, some good came out of the movie in the sense that because it flopped, it basically destroyed his career. So the Tron series sacrificed itself to save us from Jared Leto. But I have noticed, like, I think, as far as, like, Disney looking for more, like, franchises, it seems like that is a big part of what they're doing with a lot of the Fox properties they acquired. Because it definitely feels like they're trying to turn, like, Predator, for example, into potentially a, you know, PG-13 action-adventure movie instead of, like, an R-rated action-horror movie. And it worked out really well with Predator. With the new one. My brain has stopped functioning. I forgot what it's called. Badlands. But I do wonder if it's maybe, I don't know if that's the right direction to take the series as a whole. Yeah, I mean, it's just like, yeah, they really wanted a Tron. I mean, they really wanted a Star Wars is pretty much it, and it was the closest thing they had to the Star Wars. And it was, like, in my mind, Tron is, like, this weird, it is the anti-Avatar. where Avatar was massively successful, but it didn't really have any cultural impact, kind of famously so. Tron has never been very financially successful, but it somehow has very strong cultural impact. Like, the ideas of Tron are very appealing to people, even if you haven't seen Tron, because, like, it's a motorcycle with lasers. like the motorcycle drives along and it leaves, like, a laser trail behind it, and it's like, that's just cool. That's very cool and appealing, and then the visual style of, like, a dark world with lots of neon, that's very cool. And just the idea of, like, going into a computer is a very cool idea. And so it's, I don't know. If you look around, you see a lot of Tron and a lot of media. And it's the kind of thing where you might think, it was a little ahead of its time. It was a bit, I mean, it was very ahead of its time, especially in terms of, like, visual effects. Like, it was one of the first movies to use CGI. It was actually disqualified from best visual or best special effects, or whatever the category was at the Oscars, because they thought, like, oh, using computers is cheating. And, like, it is interesting because it looks, like, if you watch the original Tron, it looks very primitive, but it works because the concept is that they're, like, inside an old computer. So in the new Tron movie, there's a moment where they go inside an old computer instead of a new computer. And instead of looking like the new movies, it actually looks like the old movies. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's just what the Tron world looks like. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan of Tron. But it's definitely, like, one of those things where it's like, you never know if this is gonna be the end. It's probably gonna be the end. But it might come back down the line when just somebody is very passionate about it. Somebody who watched the movies as a kid is very passionate about it. And, you know, they get a... Like, this happens a lot with franchise stuff, where, like, someone gets into it as a kid, and then kind of the stuff that they're passionate about might go away for a while, but then they kind of come back and get into a position of power over the over the direction of the franchise. And they're like, you know what, I'm gonna bring back the stuff I like. So, yeah, that might happen down the line. And what I think they should do with it is like an animated anthology series, like the Animatrix, or like Star Wars had, what, Visions? Because I think there are a lot of animators especially who would be, like, very eager to just, like, look, I just want to tell a short story in this world. Like, go to Genndy Tartakovsky and be like, hey, do you want to do a Tron? And he'll say yes before you have finished talking. Probably. I mean, I'm assuming, just, like, based on what I know about the guy, I'm pretty certain, like, he did the whole Dexter's Lab Tron episode. I'm pretty sure he is one of the many creators who was inspired by Tron. But yeah. Are there any, like, movies or games that you like that weren't considered very popular, Rami? Also, do you know this my game, 1 Million Buttons? Are you very confused about what you're watching right now? Did you just, like, stumble across this stream? Or, like, are you familiar with this game? Oh. Yeah. I haven't made Hololive games in a while. I actually kind of like stopped making games for a little while until I kind of had the idea for this game. This is just, the game is called 1 Million Buttons, and the idea is that there are 1 million buttons and one button is correct. I do not have 1 million buttons yet. I'm still making the game. But there are about 200,000 buttons in this build, and I've just been streaming and testing. Because I need to test to make sure I can actually click every button. It would be very bad if I released the game and like only 999,999 buttons could be clicked. So I'm, you know, just testing the game, and I figured I would stream my tests for, I don't know, archival purposes. I did already find the button, which I was very surprised about. It was very exciting. But I still gotta click all of the buttons. I'm also, like, making all the rooms by hand, and I'm trying to give every room, like, some sort of unique pattern or gimmick. Let's see, I don't know when you came in. What was the inspiration? I thought it would be funny, and I severely underestimated how big 1 million buttons was. And then after I started making it, and I realized how big it was, I was like, oh, well, I've kind of locked myself into the 1 million buttons concept. Yeah, no, I came up with the idea because I thought it would be funny, and then, yeah. It's kind of a sarcastic game. Somebody, you know, I saw that how much people like randomness in their games, right? You know, people love their roguelikes, they love their Vampire Survivors, they love their gacha games, and I'm like, what is the most sarcastic extreme I can take that idea to? Just a completely random game where there are 1 million buttons and one button is correct. So that's how it started, and then I kind of accidentally made it weirdly engaging. Like, the intention was to be a parody of random games, and I was sort of going for like a Bennett Foddian, not exactly a Bennett Foddian type game, but that like same sort of anti-game sort of mindset. But then, like, I accidentally made it, like, satisfying to press the buttons, and it's kind of satisfying to look at, you know, the pattern after you've done it, and it's kind of satisfying to, like, walk around and see, oh, like, the different patterns you'll encounter in different rooms, and it's got this, I don't know, kind of power wash simulator sort of turn your brain off and click. So the funny thing is, like, I've got a timer in every room that keeps track of, like, how many buttons you've pressed and how long you've been playing. So, yeah, so I've been playing this run 7 hours and 30 minutes, and I've pressed almost 50,000 buttons. And the thing is, the time doesn't start until you click the first button, so the fastest theoretical speed run is just getting it on the first button. So, yeah, but good luck with that, because it's literally a 1 in a million chance. So I'm very curious if speedrunners are going to try to do it. There could also be like a 1 million button speedrun that, like, oh, click every button. Because that is kind of something I expect, is like, people, if they play this game, they're probably going to either say this is stupid and put it down immediately, or get really into clicking the buttons and like just want to keep clicking the buttons even after they find the correct button. Because like I said, it has kind of like a power wash simulator type of like Zen, just brain off thing. So like maybe people will want to click all 1 million buttons, but I've done the math, and like at my average clicking speed, which is about 100 buttons a minute, it would take me about 160 hours to click 1 million buttons, so... Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I figure either I'll release it and nobody will play it, or I'll release it and some people will get unhealthily obsessed with it and I'll feel really bad about it. Maybe I should put some, like, how Nintendo, like, Wii games would have the, hey, you should probably go outside screens if you've been playing for too long. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. I was, like, posting on my social media when I started these streams, but I just kind of sometimes, like, I just want to click the buttons. I don't really feel like advertising to everyone. Yeah, I do have a mechanic where, like, messages will pop up after a certain amount of buttons. So I can put, like, jokes or tutorials in there. I am thinking maybe I'll do, you know, like I said, I am inspired by Bennett Foddy, but also, like, the Stanley Parable, so maybe I could have, like, just record voice lines that I say stuff, instead of the text screens. I don't know. Right now, kind of the focus is, like, the immediate focus is test all of the buttons that I have, and then the focus after that is, like, actually place all of the buttons, and then kind of figure out the other stuff. Because that is sort of, it has wound up being a very large process. Trying to decide which room to do next. Because, yeah, like I said, in this build there are 200,000 buttons, so I found the button at about 20,000 and 3 hours in, and now I'm at almost 50,000 and twice as long in, 7.5 hours in. So and that is out of what, 200,000. So I'm a quarter of the way done. Quarter of the way done testing this game. This is my 4th stream, 7.5 hours in. So and the game is only 1/5 of the way done. So yeah, it's, you know, if nothing else, I'm dedicated to finishing it, I guess. Is it a good idea? Will it be a good game, or will it just be a A monument to my hubris? I don't know. We'll see. Is there anything, I haven't really been following the HoloLive scene in a while. Is there anything interesting going on there? That was good. I saw that Miko is nominated for Best Streamer. And my first thought was like, good for her, I want her to win. But then I saw a post that was like going through like, yeah, here's all of the winners of like Best Streamer at the Game Awards. And like all of them either had some huge like controversy immediately afterwards, or like just had some horrible thing happen to them. And it's like, you know, okay, maybe Miko doesn't, maybe it's better if she doesn't win. Because apparently that award is just literally cursed. It is always funny though when like a VTuber gets nominated for that. And it's just like some dude, anime girl. And then I see all the reactions. People are like, who is the anime girl? I don't know who this anime girl is. I'm like, well, I don't know who those dudes are, but I do know who the anime girl is. Oh, and also, like, so this game, its Steam page is up if, you know, if it seems at all interesting. Like, wish lists are really helpful. Or, like, it is interesting because, like, it does feel like VTubers are pretty mainstream with younger audiences, but older audiences still kind of find them very weird. But it has been interesting to see like VTubers get more I guess integrated into the broader streamer landscape, where it's not weird for like a Vinny Vinesauce or someone to just be like, hey, I'm going to do a stream, and one of them has an anime avatar. Because I feel like 5 years ago, that may have been seen as odd. But everyone's just kind of chill with it now. It's like, yeah, okay. And, or like, I don't know, like, what was it? Like, there was a VTuber Marvel Rivals tournament, and like, Coney was technically qualified, and he was on Doki Bird's team, and there's like a whole bunch of drama about that or something. But like, that's just, I think that's interesting. The like flesh tubers are just kind of chill with streaming with VTubers now. And that does look pretty cool. Just kind of light up the night sky. I think I'm gonna finish this room and then kind of call it a night. But it is a bit of a. I try to have about like 2,000 to 3,000 buttons in each room. There are, I think, 95 rooms in this build. Ultimately, the number of rooms is probably going to approach 500. Yeah, it was definitely, like, I think some people thought it was a fad at first, and then it just kind of, no, this is just another way to stream. I saw a thing where, like, some, like, on, like, some older millennial journalists were, like, being very, like, gaming journalists were being very negative about VTubers and throwing just, like, very harsh accusations at VTubers and, like, people who like VTubers. And it's like, it's like, how can you be into video games and anime and stuff and sort of, like, have this attitude? Because it's kind of the same attitude that people had towards video games and anime. Like, oh, it's this fad for weird people, or kids. And it's just kind of like, well, the internet changes, times change. You know, like, was it like Gura and Pekora sang the song at the Dodgers game? Yeah, every time I see, like, sometimes I'll see creators outside of the Hollow sphere play, like, Hollow fan games, and it's always kind of weird to me, because I feel like I played a small role in sort of the development of Hollow fan games. I kind of was sort of the small domino. Like, whenever I see, like Maximilian Dude has played the like Idol Showdown a couple times. It's just like, I don't know. Like, that game may or may not have been made if I hadn't made Small Ame and kind of, like, popularized... Not single-handedly, I don't want to take too much credit, but, like, some people have said, like, oh, we saw Ame play a fan game, and that kind of gave us the inspiration to make our own. So it is kind of like... I don't know, it feels weird. I'm just a guy. I'm not supposed to have an impact on other people's lives. But it definitely is, like... When people ask me, like, oh, have you made other games? And I always have to kind of figure out how to explain... Well, I have to ask, like, do you know what Hololive is? Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, like, overstate my impact, because, I don't know. I don't want to, like, take too much credit from... I do feel like I was definitely the small domino at the start of the meme, you know? But it was a lot of people put in a lot of work. And, like, if I hadn't made Small Ame, somebody would have made a really good fan game eventually anyway, and kind of kicked it all off, and it's like, yeah. So... But I am happy to know that I have had a positive impact on other people's lives and the world in general. Even if it is in kind of a silly and specific way. You know, people have told me that they got into game development because they saw my game. And I'm like, that's really cool that I have had an impact and an influence on this person who I will probably never meet in person and, like, never would have interacted with if this hadn't happened. So I don't know. I feel like I may be getting a little bit too deep. But this game, like, does that. It just kind of, it's almost hypnotic. You just get into the button clicking and you're just like, yeah, man, I'm just gonna talk about the deep thoughts while I click the buttons. Or the not so deep thoughts. I think I don't really watch many... Yeah, I'm going to... So the music is kind of randomly generated. I'm going to do more with that. I didn't initially have the music. I kind of added that in as a way to generate some music for the trailer. And then I was like, oh, this actually has, like, a nice, it has a nice effect on the gameplay, where, like, it makes me want to keep clicking, because I want to keep the music going. Because the way the music goes is it, like, it tries to match the tempo of your buttons, of your clicking. So if you're clicking slower, the music goes slower, and if you're clicking faster, it goes faster. And I don't know, I liked the way it affected it. But what I'm definitely going to do is add, like, more right now it only has like this one drum beat and this one bass line. So I'm going to do, like, have more variety. Because it's definitely, like, hearing the same thing for almost 8 hours now. Not 8 hours straight, this is, like, over the course of 4 days. But, yeah, hearing the same music over and over again is sort of like, okay, we could use a bit of variety. So I will definitely work on that. But that is what testing is for, to see, like, what works about the game and what doesn't. And functionally, I'm very happy that the game, like, hasn't exploded yet, and my save system worked correctly, and yeah. Like, everything technically seems to be working correctly. I haven't, like, placed a button out of bounds, because I did that a couple of times before, but, like, those got fixed. So this, yeah, test has been going surprisingly smooth. And then once I'm done testing, I have to do the other 80% of the game. I would really like to do, I don't know, like, as I'm making the game, like, there's so many things I'm like, it would be cool if I did this in the game. It's like, I feel like a multiplayer mode would be really good. But I also know that I am not, I've never done multiplayer before. Just by me alone? No, this one is just by me alone. Like, other games I've worked with artists and musicians and stuff. Because, you know, I am decent at programming and I'm pretty good at designing games, I think. So, but I'm not good at art. I can't do music at all. So that's why, like, the music in this game is just randomly generated. But, like, yeah, most of my Hollow games, if it didn't look like ass, I probably had an artist helping out. And then, like, on Age of Advent, we had, like, a different artist and musician on basically every minigame. Like, that was and then we also had a whole bunch of testers. Like, that game was a whole thing. Like, I led a whole team. There were, like, I think 20 people on the team, and everyone did an incredible job. Yeah, I think I made a few mistakes with that game in terms of leading the project, but because it was my first time leading a project that was, like, more than a couple of people. But you know, you learn, you move on. I think that game wasn't quite as wasn't as successful as I hoped it would be. But you know, just gotta move on. It is, I don't know, making games is kind of a, sometimes it's cool and sometimes it's frustrating. I would definitely recommend giving it a try. You know, you don't necessarily have to, like, get real deep into it, but I think it is something that once you know like what goes into making a game, you kind of appreciate the games that do get made a little bit more, because it is kind of a miracle that any games get made at all, that any games get finished. Like I would say, like, yeah, it's worth just like downloading Unity for free or Godot, following along with the tutorial, because it's very, like, the first time you press a button and then a little dude on the screen moves and you're like, oh, I can just like, I can do that. I can make the little guy move because I wrote this line of code. And oh, maybe if I change the line of code in this way, he'll go faster. It's just very satisfying to have that power. And it's definitely like, I wish the tools and the information had been more readily available when I was younger, because I really wanted to make games when I was a kid, but it was like, it felt like something that was locked behind, you know, you gotta go get a college degree and you gotta learn to do all this stuff, and you gotta have this special expensive software, and you gotta do this and this and this, and like, it's just wasn't something that I could reasonably do. And like, maybe I could have if I had had the information, but the information wasn't as freely available. Like today you just go to YouTube and you type in game dev tutorial, and then you get a million step-by-step instructions on how to make a game, or like how to get started at least. Because like I did eventually wind up going to school and like learning software development, but I honestly learned more about game development from from YouTube tutorials and from just making games. And sometimes I would make bad games. Usually I would make bad games, and then eventually I made a game that people actually liked and played. So yeah, just I don't know about trial and error, but just like practice, I guess, is what it took. Like any craft or any trade, I guess. Alright. I think this start is almost done, and we've hit the 2-hour mark, and my space heater of a PC is starting to make it a little hot in here, so I'm about to call it a day. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. Yeah. I think I'm gonna call it here. If this was an interesting stream, I will just, like I said, this is only stream number 4 out of who knows how many, but I have quite a ways to quite a ways to go. I am 10% of the way done. So, oh no, not 10%. I am 25% of the way done. Yeah. So I will just be here, probably yapping if no one's in chat. Yeah. Yeah, it was good chatting.